I'm your host, sabrinasalvati. I'm your host, sabrinasalvati.
All right. Happy Tuesday, guys. Welcome to Sabby Sabs podcast. I'm your host, Sabrina Salvati. If you are new, I want to let you know that Sabby Sabs podcast is a part of Revolutionary Blackout Network. You can catch me there on Thursdays for the Sabby and JB show. And you can catch me here on Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, and every other Sunday. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you all had a great weekend and I hope you had a good St. Patrick's Day. But we are right back here to kick things off. We have a lot to discuss tonight, some interesting stories that have come about, and even more that will continue on, at least for Thursday. Couldn't cover everything tonight, but there's a lot of news that's been breaking within the past 2 days. Shout out to everyone watching on YouTube, Rockfin, Twitter, and Rumble. And let's go ahead and say hello to the peeps in the chat. Shout out to JR Jr. I'm somewhat skeptical of the authenticity of the Rapaport video. Are we certain it wasn't staged and that he isn't involved? I'll get into that, JR Jr. I will get into that. I'll tell you what I think is happening there. Shout out to Alfred. That video was staged. Please don't give it any credibility. We'll talk about it. I got to remember, not everyone that watches this show is on Twitter. So a lot of people that watch this still haven't seen it. So we'll get into that. Shout out to Miguel, says peace. Greetings, Lee, says hi, Sabby from merry old England. Obama visit was quite a surprise, but I just assumed it was him trying to blag more money and access for his foundation. We have a lot to discuss about that as well. And shout out to the UK in the house. Shout out to OG Sock Puppet. YouTube unsubscribed me. Just seen you on the hill. I haven't seen you for weeks. I'm so sorry, OG. It does happen with YouTube. Everyone, make sure you double check that you're still subscribed. But yeah, they do this once a month. They'll go through. We've had it happen on RBN too. Shout out to P. Smith, says, not all heroes wear capes. You are my hero. Thanks to you, I was able to tell my friends that brought it up that Biden never reversed Trump's tax cuts. Oh, thank you, P. Smith. I do not consider myself to be a hero. The hero is you. You, the person that you see in the mirror. Shout out to Lawrence, says, there ain't no finer place to be than running Lakeshore Drive. I've been on Lakeshore Drive. Shout out to Daniel, says, wow, drop Obama already. Not one banker, hedge fund manager, or realty CEO in jail for the assault of the taxpayer 0708 financial meltdown. Over 1,000 went to jail for the savings and loan scam. Sad. Shout out to Luz, says, yes, the government should intervene, but only in order to guarantee free speech. What they are doing now is a moral abomination. That's an interesting point. If you haven't had a chance to do so, make sure you answer that poll. It's actually pinned to the top of the live chat about whether or not you think the government should intervene when it comes to social media. That has to do with one of the stories we're going to cover tonight. It's a really important story about SCOTUS, and Matt TAIBBI, weighs in on that as well. Shout out to Red Six, says, hello, Sabby. Happy Tuesday. By the way, great segment on Rising this morning. Thank you so much. If you guys haven't had a chance, when you get a chance, check out the Rising segment I did this morning. I actually shared it through my newsletter and also put it in the community tab of my YouTube channel. Great discussion there. Shout out to Hannah G, says, oh, bummer. Greetings, Flower Bro. The government should antitrust social media, but they shouldn't run social media. Effectively, they already do if you consider their cozy symbiotic relationship with the major social media platforms. Yeah. Shout out to Randy, says, good evening, Sabby comrades. Greetings, Dana, says, hey, everyone. Shout out to Gup, says Gaza's waterfront property could be very valuable. Jared Kushner. Of course he would say that. Shout out to Wesley, says good evening from Atlanta, Georgia. What's up, ATL? ATL in the house. Shout out to Sean Miller. I'm not sure what that's a symbol of, but welcome. Greetings, Dublin, says Sabby, thumbs up. Thank you. Shout out to Sean, says, what's up to Miguel? Greetings, Metal Music, says, evening, guys. Shout out to Lamar, says, hello, Sabby Land. And greetings, Retro Gamer, says, hello. Shout out to Katie. I'm assuming it's Katie, not Caddy. Katie says, hi, Shabby, first time here. Welcome. Welcome. It's always great to see new peeps in the chat. Shout out to Kill Your Egorgers, saying hello to Miguel, Lawrence, Sean, Miguel again, and Dana, you blessed heretics of the establishment. And shout out to Cloudness, says, happy Taco Tuesday, everyone. Sabby Sabs podcast, doo, smoking a spliff, and my 13 puppies are 3 weeks old. I wonder if you're going to keep all those puppies. And shout out to Ravina, says, doo, comrades. Shout out to Tim, though. Hey, Sabs, I'm trying to become an activist professionally. My degree is in criminal justice. You have any suggestions? I want to tear down the duopoly and make true change as a progressive. I would say get involved in one of the activist groups that is actually active, first of all, because there are activist groups and organizations that actually aren't really doing anything on the ground. They just exist because they've been around for a long time. I would say check out PSL, Party for Socialism and Liberation, if you're looking to break down the duopoly or tear down the duopoly, because they're anti-duopoly and they are activists. They actually do things on the ground. They're the ones that actually heavily lead the pro-Palestinian protests that you've seen all over the country, them and Answer Coalition. And then also you can check out Socialist Alternative. That's actually Shama Sawant's a group. Socialist Alternative is also anti-duopoly. And again, they are activists. They do things on the ground. So you might want to check out those organizations. And hello to, I don't know why I said it like that. I've been watching a lot of British TV. Like, I don't know what's going on. I've been watching a lot of like British shows like recently, and I don't know, some things might be rubbing off on me. But I actually just started watching this show called The Gentleman. It's on Netflix and it's based in the UK. Check it out, guys. It's really good. It's really good. I have like 2 episodes left. Shout out All Ones the Same, says love Sabby and RBN. And shout out to Teddy, says good afternoon from an unseasonably warm Oregon. Yeah, we've had some early warm weather here in Massachusetts as well, but now it seems like the cold is coming back. It's just been going back and forth. Really interesting time of year. Maybe the groundhog was right. Let's go ahead and get a shout out to everyone who is a Sabby patron. Shout out to all the patrons in the house. You're out here doing the damn thing. If you're interested in being a Sabby patron, I have 5 categories: ultimate, Sabinators. There's also Sabsters. Don't forget about the Sabbies. And of course, members. And by the way, guys, if you can think of another way for me to display this, let me know. I'm open to suggestions. Thank you guys so much for your support. Really do appreciate it. You're holding down the fort around here. Always open to suggestions. Okay, what are we talking about tonight, ladies and gentlemen? Let's go ahead and share that beautiful thumbnail. Dun, dun, dun. I'm also going to poll you guys about this sometime too. I've had this same template for my live streams for quite some time. I think it's been probably at least almost 2 years since I've had this template. So I'm open to suggestions about that as well. Again, graphics is not my thing. Tonight, we are discussing Barack Obama visits the UK Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak. That is Rishi actually in the picture right next to him. What was that all about? Considering Barack Obama is not the president anymore. We're also going to discuss Matt Taibbi's SCOTUS alarm. I don't know if you have heard about this, but the Supreme Court is actually hearing a very important case right now in reference to social media and government involvement and whether or not the government should be allowed to be involved in social media. I'm telling you, the Twitter files were just the beginning. Matt Taibbi's going to break that down pretty well. We're also going to discuss Dana Bash versus Nancy Pelosi. Now, this is in reference to Israel and Gaza, and also this request from Chuck Schumer that has been made recently. So that's an interesting discussion. You'll also see part of the interview that Dana Bash had with Netanyahu as well. And we're also going to discuss Michael Rapaport busted again, ? Michael Rapaport has been very cringe on social media. We'll get into that. That's also in reference to Israel and Gaza. And recently there's been a viral video. We're going to get into whether or not I think that video was real or not about Michael. And last but not least, we're going to start the New York ballot measure results for 2023. We are slowly making our way to the 2024 ballot measures. So let's go ahead and get started. Let's get it started. Shout out to the old crow. Thank you so much for the super chat. My birthday twin. I can't wait to see you roast Destiny just like Nick did. He's crashing out. I ain't paying attention to that fool. Let me tell you something, okay? This dude, you want me to go on your platform at the drop of a dime, as if I had nothing else going on today, on your platform where you can mute me whenever you want? Get the fuck out of here. Not you, old crow, but Destiny. I'm not wasting my time with that clown. Not wasting my time. Okay, let's go ahead and get started with the very first story, which is about Michael Rapaport. So apparently there has been this video going around on Twitter that has gone viral of Michael Rapaport having a conversation in a hallway. It looks like this is either a hotel or an apartment building, whichever. And people have questions about this video. And I have questions about this video. Some people saw this and they retweeted and posted it and said it's a gotcha moment for Michael Rapaport. For me, I don't feel like this video is a gotcha. And I'll get into that in just a second. First and foremost, I want to explain to you just how bad Michael Rapaport has been in reference to Israel and Gaza. I want to start off with this clip here where he's actually repeating Zionist lies, still spreading propaganda about what has happened to the Palestinian people and what happened on October 7th, even though some of these things that he's mentioning have already been debunked. Let's go ahead and get into that video here that he posted. Jesus.
164 days. 164 days since October 7th. There's 134 hostages in Gaza. There is no hostage deal. And remember this, every single person associated with Hamas is a motherless They rape, they commit arson, they kidnap, they murder, and they would still be doing it today.
Pause. So one of the talking points that he's repeating is the talking point about the sexual assaults, obviously, which has already been deemed not credible. right? The New York Times already had to part ways with the so-called journalist. And I say so-called because obviously we went through her background. She was not a journalist until all of a sudden after October 7th, right? She was a former member of the IDF, right? So they've already had to part ways with her. The story has been debunked multiple times by not just the Gray Zone, but also The Intercept has also debunked that story. And of course, there was no forensics evidence in reference to that as well. But notice how people like himself, Rabbi Shmuley, they continue to repeat that talking point.
If they weren't stopped, there's no hostage deal yet, because the atrocities that happened on October 7th are the single best thing that has ever come out of the Gaza Strip in 75 years. Can you believe that? These guys have wasted 75 years trying to take over Israel. There's no two-state solution. There is no two-state solution with these. They want they want a one-state solution, and that ain't happened. And
let me pause for a second. So this is another thing that's pretty revealing. He talks about that the Palestinian people do not want a two-state solution. The two-state solution so-called offerings, or the partition, so to speak, you have to remember this did not include the right to return. And also, why should they have to have a two-state solution instead of a one-state solution when they were already there on the land? You have to remember it was Israel that actually forcefully removed them from their homes and put them in an open-air prison. So we also have to remember that. So it's okay for Israel to have all the land, but it's not okay for the Palestinian people to have all the land. Again, that shows you the level of supremacy.
They killed and kidnapped the most peaceful people in Israel, and they did it on purpose. They did that on purpose. They want all the land. And I'm starting to think these dumb we're going around saying that they're martyrs, this, that, and the third, and that life doesn't start until death. I think these are living their life hoping and praying they take over. Can you imagine that? You waste your whole life, day after day, year after year, decade after decade, with hopes and dreams of taking over Israel?
So how is that any different from what Israel has been doing for the past couple decades, since 1948? How is that any different? How is that any different from Israel trying to remove all the Palestinian people, removing people from the West Bank and building illegal settlements? You have to remember, a lot of the Palestinians that were in Gaza were refugees. They were forcefully removed and they were put there. So how is it any different?
Whatever the rationale it is, whatever the rationale is, it's dumb as
So that just goes to show you a little bit of the rhetoric that has been coming from Michael Rapaport. Now, for those who are not aware, Michael Rapaport, he is a, I guess, washed up actor now. Like, he used to be a little bit more popular back in the day. I'll show you an example of that later on. But it's almost as if like these Zionist organizations actually sought out to find Hollywood actors that were a little bit more B-list or C-list. They're not as popular as they used to be. That's where Deborah Messing comes in, right? That's where Noah Tishby comes in. A lot of these people that you haven't heard from in a while, Jerry Seinfeld, who a lot of us have probably forgotten about, they have recruited these people, right, to get them to come forward and to push their propaganda. Now, this is the viral video that is going around on Twitter. And Michael Rapaport says there's a video circulating that makes it seem like I'm getting paid for all my videos. This is not real. CGI and AI'd me. Now, we'll bring up the video and I'll let you see it for yourself. I will go ahead and tell you, I don't think this is CGI. I don't think it's AI. I think it is actually him. I think it is real, but I'll tell you what I think about this video and how this came about. Listen to this.
Price for the videos I've been getting. If I say Israel, you got to pay me a certain price. If I say Zionist, you pay me a certain price. If I say Zionist, Israel, and Jewish, that's the big three, I get paid for that. Right, same as always. Yeah, just keep paying me the same thing. Zionist, Israel, Jewish, you pay me. No problem. If I do a But what if I do a watermelon emoji and if I say something about fuck Palestine?
Okay, let's pause here for a second because I want to show you one thing that I noticed about this video the first time I watched it. So a lot of people were retweeting this and they said, oh, Michael Rapaport, you're busted, right? That's why I'm like busted with a question mark, because he is actually standing in front of, is this a picture? There's a picture here on the wall. Notice there's a reflection in the picture. In the picture, you can actually see the reflection of the exit sign, which is across the hall, right? And you can also see his shadow here. And you can also see the reflection of the other side of the hallway in the picture. The reason why I'm bringing that up is because it is obvious here, this is a door that is open and someone is recording this video. So you would also be able to see, if not in that picture, at least from the side, you would be able to see that there is someone there. This was the big giveaway, I think, right? Like some people said like, oh my God, you're a fool. You got caught. Or some people were like, no, I think this could be staged or whatever. I think it is staged. I don't think that this is real. And I'll tell you what I mean by that. I think he's acting. I think he knows that he was being filmed. Again, the big giveaway is the picture that he's standing in front of, which has the reflection from the other side of the hall. That part is very telling. Okay, let me let him finish.
If I say fuck Palestine on camera, okay, you're gonna give me more. Okay, cool. Don't film me. Price for the videos.
So again, we'll fast forward here because I want you to see, I want to stop right about here when he turns to walk. Okay, so he turns around and then the person who is filming him shuts the door and he says, you don't film me. Watch this.
Don't film me. Price for the videos I've been getting. If I say Israel.
So again, you mean to tell me at no point when he was in this hallway, even when he's standing right here, you don't see that this door is open right here and someone's filming you? Of course he does. This was an act. This is Michael Rapaport acting, and he was probably paid to do this. It's just too obvious. I'm like, come on, guys. I know if that were me and I was standing there, I would be able to see, I would be able to see on the side of my eye that there is a door open right here. Two, why the hell would you go into the hallway and start talking about, will you pay me if I say these things? Why would you talk about that openly in the hallway if that's something that's supposed to be kept under wraps, right? You would not. But he did. Because I believe it's an act. Now, what's interesting, let's come out of here. Gritty is the way said, LOL. Okay. It's interesting because remember in his comment here, he said, this is not real. CGI and AI'd me. That's not CGI. And that's not AI. That's him. And I believe he's acting. Now, another thing I wanted to point out in reference to him being paid, because this is not to say he's not paid to make the comments that he's making on Twitter. There's actually a video here, and MB shared this and said, is this you and the price ? He may have forgotten about this. Listen to this.
You got me. I make money off of all these posts. Okay. Yes, I make money. I don't want to say how much money I make off of these posts. Pro-Israel, pro-Zionist, pro-Jewish posts. Yes, I make money per post and I get paid extra. I shouldn't be saying this, but I get paid extra every comment that's pro-Hamas. So every time you guys make comments saying, you know, from the river to the sea, or if you post a Palestinian flag or a watermelon, I get paid a little bit more. So I don't know what anyone else is doing. I don't know about their deals, but that's.
Let me pause for a second. This is why I was trying to tell people not to respond. And I was doing it too at first, but stop responding to the Zionists on Twitter. A lot of these accounts are paid for you. Every time you retweet them, Every time you comment, a lot of these accounts, these people are getting paid. So don't respond to them. Don't respond to them on Twitter. Just FYI.
It's my deal, and I just want to be honest about it. Okay, I just want to be honest about it going forward. That I do get paid off of every pro-Jewish, pro-Israel post. When I say free the hostages, I get paid a little bit. I can't go into the details of the deal that I have made with the higher ups. I can't even say who they are, but it is true. And when you comment with Palestinian flags, I get paid more money. When you comment saying propaganda, I get paid even more. That's all.
Yeah. So that's not surprising to me. Dr. He Lee said, at the expense of genocide, he has no conscience at all. Yeah, it's, some people feel like it's not him. This has been debatable. I see a couple comments here where Mentoring said, of course it's staged. Why would he discuss that topic in the hallway barefoot? Why wouldn't he be in his room? That's a good point. Some people feel like I do. They feel like it was staged. He was just acting. And some people feel like, no, he actually was caught. I don't think this was a gotcha for him. I think this was just a part of the plan. Just like I've also heard from people that the snowball video of him on Twitter where someone's throwing a snowball in his face, I've also heard from people that was staged as well. Now, here's the interesting part. Some of you may not remember this. I don't know how old everyone is in the chat, but I seem to remember Michael Rapaport actually playing a Nazi in the movie Higher Learning, right? So he tweeted this as well. He said, I'm canceling myself for playing a Nazi in Higher Learning. So for those who may not have seen that movie, right? So here's the part about this that's very telling, though. Because what it goes to show you is that, yes, he's acting and he's playing a part, he's playing a role for a movie, but it goes to show you how he can, on one hand, he can identify with the fact that he is Jewish, right? And on the other hand, he can still play a Nazi. Oh, Michael, I know. He killed Tyra Banks. I know, Michael. I know. So yeah, because people did start to call that out. They're like, didn't you play like a Nazi or something like that? So yeah, I don't know. Think whatever you want about that video, but I feel like it's staged. That's my take on that. Let's go to some of the comments here. Sparky said, make Israel Syria again. In those Ottoman Empire days, Levant Jews got along well with their neighbors, whether Muslim, Christian, or otherwise. This is true. Zionism changed all that. Thank you for this as well. Denazify Israel. And thank you for this one as well. Go Yemen, fight the power. Thank you. None of your business. Sabby, we see his shadow, but not face in reflection. I still think that's him, bruh. I think that's him. He probably got paid to retweet that too. You never know. I think that's a comment on Rockfin, Eric. I can take that if you're ready. Thank you for the tip on Rockfin JVB. Junior should have picked Rapaport for VJ. VP. Oh, PVP. RFK Jr. should have picked Rapaport for VP. Geez, I'm off today. No worries. Thank you for the Rumble rant, Dave. The guy whose biggest role was playing a skinhead in Higher Learning is a lying Zionist shill. Fitting. There you go. All right. Let's get into the SCOTUS story because I think this is very, very concerning. I don't know if everyone is familiar with this, but right now, actually, the Supreme Court is hearing a case about the government's involvement with social media. So this is very concerning. You guys know how I feel about the Twitter files. I covered those extensively on this show, but this situation has not gone away. And now it is actually at the Supreme Court. This is a different case, but we're running into the same issue. The Supreme Court seems favorable to the Biden administration over efforts to combat social media posts. Here we go. The Supreme Court seemed likely Monday to side with the Biden administration in a dispute with Republican-led states over how far the federal government can go to combat controversial social media posts on topics including the pandemic and election security in a case that could set standards for free speech in the digital age. The first question I have is controversial, right? Who decides if it's controversial or not? Well, typically that would be the platform. But as we learned from the Twitter files, the government actually was contacting Twitter executives and telling them what to remove and what to suppress on their own platform, right? That hasn't really disappeared completely. We see that happening still with Facebook. Mark Zuckerberg talked about this to Joe Rogan, that he was told to suppress the Hunter Biden laptop story, correct? So that means that the government would decide what they consider to be controversial. We're living in very dangerous times. The justices seem broadly skeptical during nearly 2 hours of arguments that a lawyer for Louisiana, Missouri, and other parties presented, accusing officials in the Democratic administration of leaning on the social media platforms to unconstitutionally squelch conservative points of view. Lower courts have sided with the states, but the Supreme Court blocked those rulings while it considers the issue. So here's something I want you to think about. Whether you're liberal, conservative, or let's just say you may not have a political ideology, I don't want you to focus on the fact that the speech that was suppressed or squelched in this article was conservative points of view. It really doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if it was conservative. It doesn't matter if it was liberal. It doesn't matter if it was progressive. What matters is that the speech is being removed. It's being suppressed. People are being removed from platforms. People are being deplatformed. I've seen a lot of people come and go on this platform, on Twitter, because of this issue. Same thing with Facebook, and the same thing with Twitter. Several justices said they were concerned that common interactions between the government officials and the platforms could be affected by a ruling for the states. In one example, Justice Amy Coney Barrett expressed surprise when Louisiana Solicitor General J. Benjamin Aguinaga questioned whether the FBI could call Facebook and X, formerly Twitter, to encourage them to take down posts that maliciously release someone's personal information without permission, the practice known as doxing. Do you know how often the FBI makes those calls? Barrett asked. Justice Brett Kavanaugh also signaled that a ruling for the states would mean that traditional everyday communications would suddenly be deemed problematic. The case Monday was among several the court is considering that affect social media companies in the context of free speech. Last week, the court laid out standards for when public officials can block their social media followers. Less than a month ago, the court heard arguments over Republican passed laws in Florida and Texas that prohibit large social media companies from taking down posts because the views that they express. So think about this. It was just a couple of days ago, there was the TikTok bill, right, that passed in the House. And that's been very concerning for people. And I told you, even with that bill, it wasn't just about TikTok. It's also about websites that the government can deem inappropriate. It's also about apps, them having some type of control and telling you which apps that you can actually download. So this goes further than TikTok. It goes further than Facebook. It goes further than Twitter. And I've said before, this is a form of fascism. I really do believe this is not just about this case here with Missouri, Louisiana. This is also about the suppression of international information. They want to suppress different voices or voices that have a different opinion about the war in Ukraine. They want to suppress voices that are pro-Palestinian. And we've seen that happen for years on Twitter, at least I have, the pro-Palestinian voices. They want to suppress voices that have compliments for Russia, right? And they want to uplift and boost the voices that actually back the State Department narrative. So this is a very scary time. And I never really thought that in my lifetime I would see this happen, because I feel like we went past the McCarthy era and here it is 2024 and we're trying to go back to the McCarthy era. Very telling times. And it also brings up the situation with Julian Assange. Why is Julian Assange imprisoned? Because he published information that showed that the US government and the US military had committed war crimes, that they were actually killing innocent people. How many more? How many more Julian Assanges? How many more does there have to be before people really push back and fight back against this? If we don't have our speech, what do we have? A little bit more here, and then we'll get to Matt Taibbi. The cases over state laws and the ones that were argued Monday are variations on the same theme. Complaints that the platforms are censoring conservative viewpoints. And I would say not just conservative viewpoints, because they heavily censor and suppress leftists as well. And by leftists, I do not mean Democrats. I mean people that are progressive, socialists, Marxists, communists. We are heavily censored. The states argue that White House communication staffers, the Surgeon General, the FBI, and the U.S. Cybersecurity Agency are among those who are coerced changes in online content on social media platforms. And we'll go to this piece here because it starts to get to the audio portion, and I actually want you to hear the audio portion. A divided Supreme Court put the Fifth Circuit ruling on hold in October when it agreed to take up the case. A decision in Murphy v. Missouri 23411 is expected by early summer. So let's go ahead and get into the audio that I want you to hear. And shout out to Glenn Greenwald for capturing this. I want you to hear what Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson argues in this case when it comes to the First Amendment. Now, remember, this is the person that Joe Biden selected, and everyone said, a lot of people said kudos to Joe Biden because he chose a Black woman. And I was one of the people that said, okay, yeah, she's Black, but what is she for? And people just kind of gave me looks and stares. I'm like, oh, how dare you? How dare you? It's about representation. Representation is great, but who is she for? And I argued back then she would be for corporate interest. I said if Joe Biden selected her, she's not going to be for a progressive view. She's not going to be for a lefty view, a socialist view. She's not going to be for the people. She's going to be for the corporations and the military industrial complex and censorship. We'll go into the first audio here because it appears I was correct about her. So shout out to Glenn Greenwald for capturing this. It says Ketanji Brown Jackson grills Louisiana. Ketanji Brown Jackson grills Louisiana Solicitor General, says that because the government can occasionally censor, they can also occasionally coerce. Listen to this, guys. I can't make this up. This is wild.
Well, whether or not the government can do this is something I took up with Mr. Fletcher. Depends on the application of our First Amendment jurisprudence, and there may be circumstances in which the government could prohibit certain speech on the internet or otherwise. I mean, do you disagree that we would have to apply strict scrutiny and determine whether or not there is a compelling interest and how the government has tailored its regulation?
Certainly, Your Honor. I think at the end of every First Amendment analysis, you'll have the strict scrutiny framework in which, in some national security hypos, for example, the government may well be able to demonstrate a compelling interest, may well be able to demonstrate.
All right. So not every situation in which the government engages in conduct that ultimately has some effect on on speech necessarily becomes a First Amendment violation, correct?
Maybe not necessarily, Your Honor. I guess the top line question I would ask is, has the government set out to abridge the freedom of speech? And in this case, you see that time and time again, because if you control
That's not the test for First Amendment violations.
Your Honor.
So notice how she interrupts him here. She is honestly arguing for the fact that the government should be able to bypass the First Amendment and push back on the First Amendment. Why do we have a First Amendment? Why do we have a Second Amendment? I feel like these rights, or our rights in this country, are just being chipped away like little by little. Like this is insane. And this is dangerous. Because think about it. People are sitting back and they're like, well, she's, liberal, and Joe Biden's the president. He's Democrat. That won't always be the case. The decisions that the Supreme Court makes, it doesn't matter who the president is. It doesn't matter if the president's a Democrat or a Republican. So to me, it's just like, this is very dangerous.
This flows from the plain text of the First Amendment, right?
No, I understand, but we have a test for a determination of whether or not the First Amendment is actually violated. So in certain situations, the government can actually require that speech be suppressed if there's a compelling interest, right?
No. So she just said the government, in certain situations, the government can actually push for speech to be suppressed. In what situations? And who decides what those situations are? The government? This could be anything, you guys. This can extend beyond this. Like, he's talking about conservative speech. They're talking about social media platforms. What about protest? What about those of us that organize online? People who organize actions and protest online. How far can this really go? I'm always thinking down the road. Like, I'm thinking, okay, this law says this right now, but what will that mean 5 years from now? And how can they expand it?
Can, Your Honor, and I guess what I would say is that the courts below never got to strict scrutiny because the government never raised this. This has never been litigated. The question in this case is whether at the front end, the government itself has undertaken
action. Is the coercion, is the state action, right? That's the question in this case.
And I would urge the court to address the state action issue just like you addressed it in Bantam Books. Use that term 4 times in Bantam Books.
And could I just understand, because it seems like an extremely expansive argument, I must say.
Okay, that's the first clip, and I want to show you the second clip as well. Again, shout out to Glenn for this one. And this one, she actually doubles down. Like, this is, it's wild, man. This is the second clip here. This is still Ketanji Brown. Listen.
Justice Jackson?
So my biggest concern is that your view has the First Amendment hamstringing the government.
I'm sorry. That is very low.
Justice Jackson?
So my biggest concern is that your view has the First Amendment hamstringing the government in significant ways in the most important time periods. What would you have the government do? I've heard you say a couple times that the government can post its own speech, but in my hypothetical, kids, this is not safe, don't do it, is not going to get it done. And so I guess some might say that the government actually has a duty to take steps to protect the citizens of this country and use.
Pause. This is something that they tend to point to. The government has a duty to protect the citizens of this country, right? And that's the argument that some of them will make. We have to suppress this person. We have to deplatform this person. We have to censor this person because we're trying to protect the people of this country. Protect them from what? And I'm here to tell you, it's not really about protecting the people of this country. We have actual hate groups in this country. So it's not about protecting the people of this country. This is just another way for them to be able to point at information that does not fit their narrative, the narrative of the military industrial complex, the narrative of the deep state, to point to it and say that it's disinformation, and to use that as an excuse to remove that information because they don't like for that information to get out there, right? I told you about how the Biden administration was surprised at the response that they received in reference to the war in Gaza. They were not expecting thousands of people to come out into the streets and be for the Palestinian people. They weren't expecting that, and they didn't know how to respond to it, right? But the information was released and the information was received that let a lot of younger people know the history of the creation of the state of Israel and how the Palestinian people wound up in the position that they're in the first place. So, see, that was not supposed to happen. People were not supposed to find out about that. We were just supposed to believe the Zionist propaganda, which is also supported by the State Department. So now they're trying to find other ways. TikTok was just the beginning. They're trying to find other ways to prevent information from getting out. Now, people point to the books. People are like, they're banning books in Florida. It's not just about banning books. It's also about suppressing information on social media, Google, the internet, all of it. We receive information in many different ways. And then what's next? I told you the TikTok bill is like the Patriot Act 2.0. They want to spy on us. They want to listen to what we say in our own homes. What happened to our right to privacy? I told you, little by little, they're trying to take our rights away. They're trying to take your Second Amendment right away. And I said it before, I am pro Second Amendment. And I say this, you may not hear this sometimes. People say they're not used to hearing that from Black people. Bump that, especially if you're Black. Especially if you're Black. I believe that everybody has the right to protect their self and their family. That's how I see that. People may say that's a conservative view. I don't think so. Let's finish this part here.
Seem to be suggesting that that duty cannot manifest itself in the government encouraging or even pressuring platforms to take down harmful information. So can you help me? Because I'm really worried about that because you've got the First Amendment operating in an environment of threatening circumstances from the government's perspective, and you're saying that the government can't interact with the source of those problems.
And Your Honor, I understand that instinct, and I guess what I tell you is
Okay, so she is basically advocating again for the government to be able to go around the First Amendment. The First Amendment exists for a reason. Like, this is absurd. This is absurd. So Matt Taibbi actually weighed in on this morning on Rising, and I believe he's also on Glenn Greenwald's show as well. He'll probably be on a number of shows discussing this. I don't know if I'll be able to get him. I feel like Matt was just on here. I don't like to invite people on too much, like back to back, because then I don't want people to feel like they're being bothered, like, like, damn, when I just on there, like that kind of thing. But he'll probably be on a number of shows. I can try to see if I can get him, but he's probably really busy right now talking about this. But he was on Rising this morning talking about the SCOTUS free speech issue. And remember, Matt Taibbi was the author of the Twitter Files. So again, the Twitter Files was just the beginning, and we're still seeing this issue with free speech on social media platforms. Here we go.
Well, first of all, that clip by Ketanji Brown Jackson, that was kind of terrifying because the entire purpose of the First Amendment is to restrain the government. It's not to restrain the public from getting in the way of government action. It's the opposite. If it restrains the government, that's a good thing. That's sort of the idea behind the statute. In this instance, the reason this suit is being filed is because the plaintiffs in this case, in particular, Dr. J. Bhattacharya and Martin Kulldorff and Dr. Aaron Hariati, they had their speech suppressed because they were contradicting a false government official opinion. And this is the entire purpose of the First Amendment, is to prevent the government from creating a hegemonic opinion that cannot be challenged. That is why we have a free press. And that was the essence of this case. And the government was allowed to argue the opposite.
Matt, devil's advocate here, I'm very sympathetic to the argument that Twitter's actions in response to the government pressure were censorship and were wrong. But it does seem to me that there's a separate question here, which is whether or not the bad actor here, or the but-for clause here, is really the government's actions, or the company's choice to kind of succumb to that sort of soft pressure. There did seem to be a lot of discussion of this case, National Rifle Association versus Volo, and it did seem that most of the judges, including the liberal judges, not exclusive to them, were making the case that that case featured direct coercion from the government of a business that's saying that they were going to blacklist a business if they did not censor or reject the NRA. In this case, I know here on the show we talk about the kind of soft pressure and the possibility of threatening social media companies with Section 230 rule changes that could basically end the ability of a lot of these businesses to function and the like. But I'm wondering if in this case and in these oral arguments, that kind of more direct pressure was raised, or is the question really whether the government is allowed to flack, if the government is allowed to reach out and make its preferences known to a social media company, as long as a social media company has the power that something and isn't feeling, I think, really directly coerced with real threats of some damage, pecuniary or otherwise, happening to their business if they don't comply with the government's requests.
So this is where I disagree with Bree's take here, because one of the things I will say is I think it's given a little too much trust that the government is going to do the right thing, which I don't trust. I don't trust the government's going to do the right thing, particularly when it comes to free speech or censorship or anything like that. I just don't trust that they're going to make the right decision. They're going to do what's in their best interest. They're going to do what works best for the deep state and the military industrial complex and Wall Street. So I disagree with her on this point here. So I don't trust that the government would do the right thing. And then also, I think that for those social media platforms, if they were presented with that option, that the government would say, you know, this is what we're laying out for you here, but you're still in power of it. I would actually say that at that point in time, the power of the owner of the platforms has already been either diminished or removed. And I say that because once the government is telling you how to run that platform, you don't really get as much say as you think you do. And I think Elon Musk is seeing that, right? Like Elon Musk is probably sitting back like, I'll be damned. I wonder if Elon Musk is ever sitting at home and he's like, why the hell did I buy this platform? He's right, like, this is too much of a hassle. But yeah, I just don't trust that the government will actually will do the right thing.
Well, Brianna, I mean, that's a good question, but there were so many instances of the government making that overt threat that you refer to that the Deputy Associate Solicitor General Brian Fletcher had to list them in advance, essentially introducing them as sort of adverse evidence at the beginning of the case in order to downplay their seriousness. In the summer of 2021, the president himself, Joe Biden, said that Section 230 needs to be immediately revoked because the companies are promoting falsehoods. There was the same thing was said by the White House press secretary, Kate Bedingfield. The Surgeon General said something very similar, that we need to take appropriate regulatory measures in response to this kind of misinformation. Renee DiResta, who is the research director of the Election Integrity Project, which was sponsored by both the State Department and the Department of Homeland Security, talked about using Section 230 to bring these companies to heel. This was an overt threat. And also, I would add, in the Twitter files, we found ample evidence of correspondence among Twitter's executives in which they described how they understood the regulatory changes that were being proposed as a threat that they must answer in order to get the government off their back. They would have to comply with the government's request to let them in on the moderation process. So we saw that in the internal correspondence. So there's both overt and less obvious evidence of this. That's not, missing from the case. That's a feature of the case. In fact, the government going public with those threats, I think, was sending a very strong message that not only the companies would hear it, but that the public would hear it. So I disagree with the notion that they didn't make that overt case, even though Fletcher said that.
And can I just make a quick follow-up to that?
Before Aubrey responds, one thing I want to tell you, I'm concerned about going into November. If this goes through, and we're talking about this ruling, if it happens from the Supreme Court, that the government can just kind of intervene even more so and determine what's allowed on these platforms. What does that mean in reference to presidential elections and platforms like Facebook or Twitter, or if TikTok's still a thing? What does that mean in reference to, like, let's say you're promoting third party or independent candidates. What if they deem that that is problematic for the American people because it takes away from, as they say, it takes away from the two major parties, and they decide to silence all the people that are promoting third party or independent candidates? What if they silence those candidates? Just something I'm thinking about going into November.
Do you have a sense that there could be a way to distinguish between, let's call it more soft pressure, the government saying, hey, I'd prefer that you don't let this fake post of a family member of a president stay up on Twitter, that request can be acceded to or denied, versus the kind of regulatory threats that were coming from the president? Do you think it's worthwhile to make that distinction, or do you think that both kinds of government contact with these kinds of companies should be precluded?
Well, let's just talk about what did happen, right? The analogy, and the justices compared it to what would happen with, say, the Associated Press or the New York Times. The analogous conduct would be calling up the editor-in-chief or the publisher of the New York Times, or let's just say a local television station, and saying, we're going to pull your FCC license unless you do X, Y, or Z, or unless you hold this story. That would be such an inappropriate call that, the person who even answered that call on the press end would be in serious ethical problems, I would say. But they didn't just do that. In this case, they went straight to the heads of the company, but they also had an industrial scale operation to do this. It wasn't just occasionally, hey, let's make a phone call and make our feelings known. They had a sort of private highway to all of these companies where they were funneling mass requests. Now, what I would say would be okay and is appropriate, in fact, even desirable, is if the president gets up and uses the bully pulpit and says, you know what, I don't like what's on Facebook. They made a mistake here, here, and here. Here's what I think the truth is. And, we see these posts that say something else. That is the entire purpose of the bully pulpit. The president has an enormous megaphone to counter that kind of thing. What's not appropriate is doing it in private and coupling it with a threat. And that's what happened in this case.
Let me pause there for a second. This is a really good point here from Penny, from Facebook jail to real jail. Yeah, and I'm worried about that for people as well. We already saw some of this exchange in reference to Facebook and the government, of them telling, again, Mark Zuckerberg to suppress the Hunter Biden laptop story because it would harm, Joe Biden's presidential election. I mean, this is crazy. It's absurd. I don't want the government to control these to have any type of control over these platforms, whether they feel the information is negligent or the information is incorrect or not. I don't want them to have any control over that. And basically we will be living in this is my if I'm picturing this of just how bad this could go, as much as people point to North Korea and they talk about how the information that comes into North Korea is controlled, what do you guys think they could try to do here? Imagine if all the information, it gets to the point where all the information that we receive in this country is controlled by the government. So there is no, let me Google this information, and you don't even know if you're receiving the correct information. It's just what the State Department wants you to see. Imagine that. If they control everything, like people in North Korea, they don't even know, like a lot of these stories, these news stories that I talk about on here, they don't even know about it because the information is controlled, what they get to see and what they don't get to see. And that's like my worst fear.
Yeah, I've been looking at the case law for, job owning is the legal term here, where the government tries to extort a private actor to do something that they couldn't get through a legislative remedy or haven't tried to get through a legislative remedy. There are cases of, I think, phone companies having dealt with. There are some examples of the past, but it's not been a well-developed or well-fleshed out category of law. So look, it's an open question, obviously, because they're litigating it now, whether this contact was not just inappropriate, but unconstitutional. And if the Supreme Court ends up saying, as unfortunately looked like it might be the case based on their line of questioning yesterday, that, look, you might view this contact as inappropriate, but it doesn't actually violate the Constitution, then the question, I guess, becomes there could still be a legislative remedy. Congress could pass a law that precludes government employees of at least federal agencies. I think actually maybe they can't do anything about, members of Congress have very wide latitude according to the Constitution, but they could, similar to, the Hatch Act says you can't campaign on federal time or money if you're a federal employee. We could structure some policy for how federal employees are supposed to interact with social media companies or just the media in general. Do you think that's the direction? I hate to look to Congress for a remedy, but is that the direction we'll have to turn if the Supreme Court does not take up this question?
Robbie mentions the Constitution, and I'm starting to wonder if the Constitution even means anything anymore. Just like I'm starting to wonder about the Bill of Rights. Do they even mean anything anymore?
Or doesn't give us the answer I want, I guess.
I think it's going to be difficult, absent a judicial ruling that this kind of behavior is illegal. I would argue that it's already illegal. I mean, some of these agencies that were engaged in this kind of behavior by statute are prohibited from engaging in domestic propaganda, let alone censorship. So the idea that the State Department is doing this, or for instance, the CIA, which was participating in some of these programs, or the FBI counterintelligence agents, the Foreign Influence Task Force, going after domestic speech, I think that's already against the law, but we need an affirmative high court ruling that says that in order to make it possible, I think, to make the legislative changes that we would want, or that I would want anyway. The problem is the enforcement mechanism is absent here. And incidentally, just to go back to the whole issue of threats and what is and is not allowed, the appellate courts that heard this case, and I was at the Louisiana hearing when there was a colloquy between the government and three appellate judges who they were very, very well versed in the case. They had read all the evidence, all the exhibits. They were clearly not happy about quite a lot of things, but they delineated a 4-part test that came from some lower court case. Brianna, maybe you can tell me what it is. I forget, but one of the standards was if the communications are phrased virtually as orders. And we saw that repeatedly in communications, both in the Twitter files and in the evidence that came into the complaint in Missouri v. Biden, which is now Murphy v. Missouri. The government would not be taking this tone with these companies if they did not have leverage over them. As you know, we've all been reporters. We've all been in the situation of having a government spokesperson sort of beg or plead, please don't write this or that, or I think you're making a mistake if you publish this. And they do so politely because they don't have any leverage to tell me what to do. I'm a member of the Fourth Estate. I have my own independence, and they don't have a right to tell me not to do it. Well, the tone is very, very different in these communications between, say, the FBI and these companies. There are letters that say things like, hey, we wrote you 6 hours ago. How come no action has been taken? Like, you would never get that just as a journalist. That
wow. Let me pause for a second. See, I remember when people were very like nasty towards Matt Taibbi when he released the Twitter files. I remember how Mehdi Hasan, was nasty towards him. I remember how they treated him when he testified in front of the House, in front of the weaponization committee. And I just remember, and I remember people telling me, who cares about Twitter? It's not a big deal. And I was like, well, no, this is a big deal. If the government was actually telling Twitter what they could or could not have on their platform, that actually is a problem, that they were telling them to remove accounts. And I just remember people like, oh, Matt's right wing. He's all conservative now. He's got a new grift and all the kind of stuff. And Matt Taibbi back then was even trying to warn people what this could escalate towards, that it wasn't just about Twitter. And here we are. Now we have SCOTUS dealing with this.
Completely different kind. Would you?
Matt, I gotta say, I got some very impolite flack once from Chuck Schumer's office back in my Intercept days, but that's neither here nor there.
Well, they can be rude, but they wouldn't have an expectation that you would comply.
But no, but
I hear you that there's something different in tone.
But this is the problem. I mean, I do think this order language, or whether you're talking about the NRA case, that's really the crucial thing. And while I agree with you and Robbie about what I think the constructive outcome should be, I find myself on the fence about whether or not this is the right mechanism to enforce it. I think some of the statutory mechanisms that you raised before about what limits the government should impose statutorily on its ability to liaise with some of these companies seems right. But in this case, the way that this is being written up, and I admit that I have not read all of the briefing here, they say that they did not raise actually any of these kinds of orders or directives from the government in the case. I'm reading a write-up, a summary in Vox, where the strongest argument made is that the government, quote, entangled themselves in the platform's decision-making process, which I can agree is a problem and maybe should be remedied through some of these statutory means. But has there been a strong enough argument made? I think this is the question. Has there been a strong enough argument made that the kinds of emails that you have covered so well in the Twitter files really did constitute an order? Or did the plaintiffs here properly bring in and make the case that statements by the president or others about Section 230 were sufficiently coercive? Was that case made? Because I think that's a much stronger case than even plentiful emails, even nagging emails, even voluminous emails saying we don't like X, Y, and Z policy. I'm having trouble differentiating that from the kind of flacking that we know all exists in the realm of the media, traditional media.
I think the thing was, though, in those emails, because I remember going through many of them, is that it wasn't even just, I think you should do this. It was remove these accounts. Like they had specific accounts telling them to remove from the platform or to flag them as Russian accounts, which many of those accounts were not even Russian accounts. Is really weird. Like, so they were making demands. Like the government was actually making demands, including politician Adam Schiff, who is really interesting. Adam Schiff, who was involved with the Twitter files as well, making demands towards that platform. And he just won the election for senator in California, which he proudly admits, basically he paid for that, right? Like AIPAC basically helped him, get that seat. It's not like he kept that a secret, but it's like basically you scratch our back, we'll scratch yours. So think about that for a second. The ones who are actually pushing for the censorship are the ones that are actually getting promoted.
Yeah. Again, it's so different from what goes on in traditional media. I mean, we did several Twitter file stories about, for instance, an episode in early 2017 where the Senate Intelligence Committee was not happy that the companies were stonewalling them on turning over evidence pertaining to possible Russian bot activity, or what evidence they did turn up they didn't like. And so right after those communications, hey, we need to see all this data, which they weren't entitled to, by the way. They asked for them. Immediately after that, they introduced legislation that would dramatically impact their ability to collect ad revenue from certain foreign customers. And so we see this back and forth within Twitter. Hey, we better do what they say and let them into this process of looking at our data on, Russians and all these other things, or else it's going to lower our bottom line. We are going to lose money. We're going to lose ad revenue. And they ended up proactively making a decision to forego that activity so that they wouldn't go ahead and pass that law. There was a similar episode where they were dragged to the Hill in order to come up with a plan for preventing the sowing of discord. This was presented to them sort of side by side with a big white paper that had been written by Senator Mark Warner, essentially listing a whole series of regulatory measures involving everything from Section 230 to the taxation of big tech companies. And, as the lower court judges said, you have to be sort of an idiot not to see what they were saying. It was like, a mob movie. Two judges compared it to a mob movie. They said, hey, it's a nice tech company you got there. It'd be a shame if something happened to it. And they, the companies certainly understood it that way. We see that from their internal correspondence. Now, the one thing I will agree with you on is that this case was not perfect in the sense that they didn't show a soup to nuts progression involving any one of the particular plaintiffs where the person was censored, and we know that they were censored because of a particular communication from the government. You can see the government saying, for instance, we don't want anybody who is creating content that would promote vaccine hesitancy. And we see that shortly afterwards, people like Dr. Bhattacharya or Dr. Kuldorf were de-amplified or removed from platforms.
Dr. Malone.
But that's not, a direct causal relationship that they've been able to establish. And I think that was the weakest part of the case. However, I think the activity itself was plainly illegal, but the problem is one of standing rather than legality.
Yeah. Oh gosh. I got to tell you, it is very concerning. I'm very concerned, and I don't know, man. Like I was worried about this when we were going over the Twitter files, and I was just like, how far is this going to go? Because it's not just going to stop at Twitter. They want to watch what we're doing, right? I mean, Edward Snowden, didn't he reveal all of this to us? Like, they want to know what we're doing, what we're saying, the conversations that we're having, who we're conversing with. Like, they want to know. They're trying to slowly remove our sense of privacy. Scary times, man. We got to push back on that. If you have not had a chance to do so, go ahead and smash that like button there, folks. And if you're new, don't forget to like, sub, and share. All right, let's go to some of the comments here before we move on. Dwayne, you're killing it in the chat, man. Dwayne is killing it in the chat. Thank you, Unemployed Scholar. Uhuru Legal Fund fiscal sponsor closed down. That's concerning. I wasn't aware of that. I'm going to check my email. I usually get emails from them. Janine said, all skin folks ain't kin folks. This is true. Hoopo says, beware of black and brown faces in high places. Devin says, Sabby, she had police unions cheering for her selection. Sus as hell. Yes, she did. Leroy says, I'm very pro Second Amendment. And Brian says, I'm pro second too. The hells yeah. Like, I just, thank you, Carpe Diem. Second Amendment is not for black people. It's about black people. Philando Castile. Yeah, I mean, it's unfortunate. It's unfortunate that we're not seen as the same way when we talk about, having the license to carry an arm. Thank you, Unemployed Scholar. U.S. government is now going after speech directly, not even in this case, claiming certain speech is action in order to go after speech. There you go. Dwayne says the Bill of Rights is dead. Thank you, Pat. The only answer to outrageous speech is more speech making the better argument. Sticks and stones can break bones, but words can never hurt me. Well said there, Pat. And thank you, Aposamos. This is a consequence of the power base's collapse. Historically, elites rely on repression to hold on to their position, plus maintain the status quo. That is a very good point there. Thank you so much. 2 quick announcements, and then we'll go to the other stories. You guys know over at RBN, we do mutual aid, and I wanted to give a shout out here for JB's chapter in Orlando. JB says Orlando chapter of RBN is raising mutual aid for our unhoused neighbors for toiletries and ponchos to keep dry for the rainy season. Our goal is $1,200 for 100 of our neighbors. If you can assist with or share, that means the world to us. You can donate here. Cash App $Orlando RBN, and you can put that in the chat when you're ready, Eric. That is $Orlando RBN. They're fundraising until April 2024. The goal is $1,200. And again, that's for toiletries and ponchos. I always tell people, I never tell you to donate to politicians, but I will ask you to donate to mutual aid. Another announcement, huge, exciting news. This is coming from Jason Call and the Green Party. The Stein campaign has crossed the threshold for federal matching funds in 20 states, but we are shooting for 21 because we want to avoid any challenges the establishment may throw at us. So we are leaning hard on Arizona to get number 21. That is huge news. And actually, I think he just submitted another update to that. Let's see if I find Bernie Sanders starting another podcast. Boy, I tell you. Yeah, because that's what everybody needs at this time. Yes, another update. The Dr. Stein campaign will hit 2 milestones by this weekend. 1, we can now file for federal matching funds. That's huge, you guys. 2, we will have the delegates to be the official presumptive nominee for the Green Party. And March 31st is the end of the FEC filing quarter. So that's huge. I wanted to make sure I shouted that out on the show. Hopefully we can get Jason on soon. All right. We are moving on to our next story. Dana Bash versus Nancy Pelosi. This is in reference to the war in Gaza. Now, she actually didn't just interview Pelosi. She also interviewed Netanyahu. Now, real quick, I do want to say something about Dana because I want you to understand the kind of talking points that she has. Dana Bash is also a Zionist. So just keep that in mind when you listen to her talking points. She's not the only one on CNN that is one. Wolf Blitzer is also. Okay. So there's a couple things I want you to know about her. You need to know that her father was a producer at ABC News. That's who is speaking here, folks. Let's get into this conversation that she had with Netanyahu first.
When the war winds down, will you commit to calling new elections? That's my question. Will you?
Dana, 2/3. First of all, what you said is wrong. The vast majority of Israelis oppose early elections until the war doesn't end. We've just had many polls on that. Look, a lot of the polls are twisted.
Channel 12 says 64% of Israelis support early elections. But all polls show
that's not. No, I'm afraid that they asked them the question, do you support it during the war? And they said no.
But that's not what Schumer is calling for. He's calling for new elections when the war winds down.
Let me pause for a second. So for those who are not aware, Chuck Schumer actually is calling for basically Netanyahu to be removed. He's calling for elections to remove Netanyahu. You know, Netanyahu has a very low approval rating in Israel. So Chuck Schumer feels that by removing Netanyahu, that will actually make things better for the Palestinian people. Chuck Schumer is a joke, and Dana's a joke right here too, because what they're trying to do is limit the problem to Bibi. They're trying to limit the problem to Netanyahu being in power instead of talking about the real source of the problem, which is Zionism. Zionism itself in its creation is racist. And instead of talking about that problem, because they're not going to be able to say that and keep that job on CNN. Let's just keep it real. Chuck Schumer's not going to be able to say that and keep that Senate seat. So what they're doing is they're doing the easy part, call out Netanyahu. And also because Netanyahu is right wing, it's easier for them to call him out. I told you one thing before. They usually tend to call out the problem as something that is easy to pick out, but they'll never go that extra step and get to the core root of the problem, which is Zionism. Netanyahu is just a branch on the tree of Zionism. You remove that branch, another one will grow. You put somebody else in that position, as long as they are still following the Zionist ideology, this will continue to be a problem for the Palestinian people. So I want you to understand that. I want you to realize what they're talking about here. They're trying to make it seem like they're trying to really do something about this problem, but they're not.
Well, we'll see when we win the war. And until we win the war, I think Israelis understand that if we were to have elections now, before the war is won, resoundingly won, we would have at least 6 months of national paralysis, which means we would lose the war. If we don't win the war, we lose the war. And that would be not only a defeat for Israel, but a defeat for America too, because our victory is your victory.
No. And see, you don't try to bring us into this. No. Your victory is not our victory. See how he's trying to put this back on the United States? This is what happens when you supply the weapons, when you supply the arms, and you constantly defend the actions of a Zionist state. Even if Israel wins the war, they still lose. Because the world will never look at Israel the same again. Biden was actually right when he said Israel is losing support. They are losing support. I don't think the Biden administration realized just how many young people in this country already knew what Israel was up to and what it was about. But the war has made it more evident to those who have not been paying attention. They're paying attention now. So even if they win this war, they still lose.
Fighting these barbarians
Will you commit
that are not
to
merely
new
threatening
elections
the survival of
when
Israel,
the war
but
winds
threatening
down?
everything that we hold dear together.
Will you commit to new elections when
I
the war
think that's
winds
something
down?
for the Israeli public to decide. But it's not something. No, look, that's something for the Israeli people to decide. I think it's ridiculous to talk about it. It's like after 9/11, after 9/11, you're in the midst of fighting the war against Al-Qaeda, and an Israeli would say, you know what we need now is either new elections in the U.S. or if your system doesn't allow, then President Bush should resign, and we should.
Pause. Actually, there were people calling for that at that point in time. There were people who wanted President Bush to step down, especially after it was revealed that this was all a lie, especially after people said, wait a minute now, I thought you said that we were going after them because Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction. Then it was reported there were no weapons of mass destruction. So I don't think that was the best example to use. You just used a war that was based on a complete lie.
Have an alternative leader. You don't do that.
Well, let's
you don't
talk
do
about
that to
why.
A sister democracy, to an ally. You don't talk about that. What you do talk about is how do we help you defeat what President Biden called sheer evil. You don't just stop after you destroyed 80% of sheer evil. You destroy 100% of sheer evil to allow a different
Prime Minister,
future for
I want to
Israelis
talk about
and
why
Palestinians alike.
the sentiment.
Okay, so that was part of the conversation with Netanyahu, and that actually leads into this discussion that she had with Nancy Pelosi. Let me go ahead and bring that up here, because this is also about the call for elections in Israel to remove Netanyahu. And let me tell you why Dana was pissed in that conversation. Dana pissed because she got to go out there now and defend to people what Israel is doing, not just on air, but off the air. Like I said, she is also a Zionist. So people now looking at her some kind of way like, what the hell? Like, how can you back something like this? So he making her look some kind of way, but actually it's Zionism making them look some kind of way. If it were not for Zionism, we wouldn't have a Netanyahu.
Here with me now is former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi. First, I just want to ask what your response is to what you just heard from the Prime Minister.
The Prime Minister's presentation proved the necessity of Chuck Schumer's speech. Chuck Schumer's speech was an act of courage, an act of love for Israel. And I wish the Prime Minister would read the whole speech, because he speaks with great vehemence about the need to defeat Hamas, He is concerned about the weakness of the Palestinian Authority and the very, very dangerous attitude of the right-wing Israeli government. The issue of food in Gaza is a very big one, and either the Prime Minister Netanyahu is unaware or ill-informed.
Pause. Nancy Pelosi has some nerve to come on national television and say that lie. She knows damn well that Netanyahu is not unaware of the starvation of the Palestinian people in Gaza and is not ill-informed. She knows damn well. For her to come on here and play the American people like that, he knows exactly what's going on. He is the cause of it. The IDF is not doing anything that Netanyahu does not want them to do. She actually went there with that. She actually tried us.
But the head of the world's central kitchen, Jose Andres, who's there, as you mentioned, Cindy McCain, World Food Program, and any other of these entities that are there to feed the people will tell you there is starvation, there is famine, there is dehydration, because Israel has not allowed the food and the humanitarian assistance to go right in.
Pause. You see how she revealed herself? She said either Netanyahu is unaware about the starvation or is ill-informed, but then she says Israel is not allowing the food to come in. Who is the prime minister of Israel? Like I said, the IDF is doing what Netanyahu wants them to do. See how she exposed herself?
So again, it's a fact that so many people are dying from lack of food. It's really a very sad situation. Now, from the standpoint of Chuck Schumer, he is, as you had mentioned, the leading Jewish elected official in our country. In history, he loves Israel, as we do. We support Israel. And the fact that he made this statement should be listened to, because Israel's reputation is at risk because of what is happening in Gaza. Now,
the reputation is already done. There is no at risk. Israel's reputation is already damaged. Notice how they continue to say they support Israel, right? You never hear them say they support the Palestinian people. You never hear them say that.
All agree. Many of us. Hamas is a terrorist organization. They should be defeated. But what happens next? We've called for a two-state solution. In the Democratic Party, I was chair of the platform committee in 1992, where we called for a two-state solution. Netanyahu has been against that.
Pause. You see how she exposed the U.S. government again? How she exposed herself again? Oh, I remember in 1992 when we proposed that. 1992. It's 2024. They were never serious about a two-state solution. So when people argue with you and they tell you that the Palestinian people rejected a two-state solution, they were never serious about giving them a two-state solution. They were never serious about giving them the right to return.
But what is the solution?
Madam Speaker, I want to ask
solution
about
what the right-wingers are saying, that they just take over Gaza?
Yeah, I want to ask about what you just heard.
It is not just the right-wing people saying that. You got Democrat politicians echoing the same sentiment, Nancy, and you know that.
The prime minister say, or maybe the better way to say it is what he would not say. He wouldn't commit to new elections. He claims that the Israeli people don't want that. Do you believe, I know you said that we should read and listen to what Senator Schumer said. Are you also saying that you support the notion of new elections in Israel as the war winds down, as Senator Schumer said?
The only thing I would disagree with what you said is I don't think it's a notion. I think it's a very serious proposal that the people of Israel be able to speak. Now, it's up to them to decide that. It's curious to me to see Netanyahu talk the way he does when he tried to interfere in American elections, but that's another subject. When he came to the Congress, criticized the President of the United States.
Oh, now all of a sudden you have all this heat for Netanyahu, but you were defending him for quite some time. Even when this war first began, you were defending. Well, Netanyahu said Israel has a right to exist. Now, all of a sudden, as he tried to interfere, and where was all this heat years ago, Nancy?
Barged into our country, into our elections. But again, let's put that aside and let's just say, as we go forward, what is wrong with advocating for elections in a democracy? And you mentioned the polls. You see that thousands and thousands of people are in the streets, even last night. Mm-hmm. In Israel. But again, it's a democracy and people have different views and they express them, and that's a beautiful thing. But for him to say, what does that say if he won't even say that as the war winds down, the people of Israel should speak? That's all Chuck was saying. But read the speech, because it condemns Hamas, it criticizes Abbas and the Palestinian Authority for not being good partners for peace. Read the speech. The right wing, sad to say, when you listen to Netanyahu, I thought it was a very weak presentation and again, argued for Chuck Schumer's speech.
Somebody spoke to Nancy, because notice how hard she's coming after Netanyahu now. Remember, it's election year. So somebody had some words with Nancy Pelosi and said, get out there and make it just it's all Netanyahu's fault. Don't talk about Zionism. Don't utter anything about that. Just blame it on the individual. That'll help us come November. Can you do that, Nancy? And that's what she's doing.
But nonetheless, he's probably the most moderate person in that coalition. And it's really a sad state of affairs. If I just may say this, I love Israel. I love the Israeli people. And this is how we think of them, about shared values.
Pay attention to what they're doing. I told you this before. They love Israel and they love the Israeli people. You never see them express this same type of sentiment towards the Palestinian people. These politicians, people like Nancy Pelosi, these politicians are telling the world that they value one group of people over another group of people. That for whatever reason, they feel as though the Israelis should be put on this pedestal and everybody else is just another group.
I remember being there as a speaker on one visit to Hadassah Hospital, and they told me they had just dealt with a clash between Palestinians and Israelis, and they treated them both the same. And they said, we didn't treat the Palestinian differently because they were Palestinian. We treated them the same because we are Jewish.
You don't treat them the same, though. It's nice that those people said that, which I question if that even happened. But it's nice if those people said that, but you don't treat them the same. Our government doesn't treat them the same. When you see the way that they treat someone like Rashida Tlaib versus Congress members that were former IDF soldiers that have an Israeli flag outside their office, but Rashida Tlaib is ridiculed for having a Palestinian flag outside her office, you don't treat those groups the same. You show preference of one over the other. When people continue to say, and mainly like Noel says this oftentimes on Call-In, that this really is a plantation nation. They do this in this country too. They don't just do it in reference to the Israelis and the Palestinian people. They do it right here in America. This is our government.
The values have been so clear. Now, we have to stop Hamas. They're a terrorist organization. What they did on October 7th was barbaric. We must free the hostages. Think of it, if it were your brother, sister, mother, father, child, any one of us would be insistent on that.
But you don't have to free the Palestinian hostages, though. Don't forget, again, Hamas has offered multiple exchanges here for the hostages. They've offered to give them back Israeli hostages to get some of the Palestinian hostages that are imprisoned. You have to remember the Palestinian hostages that are in these prisons, and I call them hostages because it's not like they actually had a court case. It's not like they actually had a trial by jury. They did not. The IDF has been known to pick up Palestinian people that they weren't even looking for, by the way. And if they couldn't find the person they were looking for, they'll just take someone else in their place. So yes, Israel has Palestinian hostages. That's why this happened in the first place. Never forget that. Never forget who took hostages first.
But as you have indicated, it's not a matter if you do it, it's how you do it. And to do it at the expense of children and their well-being is really what Chuck was addressing. And in our own law, when we give assistance to a country, we insist that they do not interfere with our giving humanitarian aid. That is part of the Leahy, Senator Leahy, when he was in the Senate, put that forth. That was one of the provisions that said, if we're giving assistance, we expect that they will not interfere with our giving assistance for humanitarian purposes.
What does that mean for the people in the West Bank, though? Because there's a lot of talk about the hostages that are in Gaza, but what does that mean for the people in the West Bank whose homes are threatened, or who are being forcefully removed from their homes, or afraid to leave their homes, empty without someone there, because settlers will actually come in and demolish their homes or take their homes while everyone in the house is gone? What about those people? What about what's happening in the West Bank? This is why I continue to tell you guys, when people say it all started October 7th, you have to push back on that. You have to talk about the settlements, the illegal settlements in the West Bank. You have to talk about the Nakba. You have to talk about how Palestinian people have been imprisoned in Gaza. You have to talk about how Israel controls the air, the land, and the sea, and how they basically control the resources as well. You have to talk about how the water that they're providing for the Palestinians in Gaza is 95% dirty water. We wouldn't want this to happen to us. You wouldn't want it to happen to you. But it seems to be okay to happen because the people that it's happening to are the Palestinians. And I don't know what Nancy had to drink before this interview, because she does seem a little buzzed.
I do want to turn quickly to Ukraine, if I may. The House Speaker, Mike Johnson, told Republican senators during their closed-door retreat this week that he was committed to finding a path ahead for Ukraine aid, maybe alone. He told Politico that he was considering a standalone bill that would require a 2/3 vote. Would you support that?
Well, it depends on what's in it, but absolutely. We cannot go
even
home
alone
for Passover and Easter if it. We must have this assistance to Ukraine.
So I don't know if she hit the bottle a couple of times or not, but first she said it depends on what's in the bill, and then she said, of course. So it doesn't really depend on what's in the bill. She's going to approve it anyway because she wants to give more money to Ukraine. When we talk about building movements in this country, there really needs to be some type of movement against the U.S. government kicking out all this money to these countries. Like I'm seriously kicking out all this money to Ukraine, kicking out all this money to Israel. Like there needs to be some type of movement to demand the U.S. government to stop giving aid to Israel, period. I'm not even talking about October 7th. I'm talking about the $3.8 billion that it gives them. In Massachusetts, did you know that Boston gives $10 million to Israel? Yet we got people here out on the street. We got people living in apartments that have black mold on the ceilings and people having asthma issues because of the mold. We got people in Boston that can't afford food. People that can't afford to pay for public transportation. But we got $10 million to send to Israel. That is the Zionist hold and the Zionist control in this country. That's a damn shame. If you kicking out $10 million to another country, I better not see one homeless person on the street. Not one.
It's sad that it's taken so long, but I'm glad to hear that there's a path. We have tried to, under leadership of Hakeem Jeffries in the House, who's been a tremendous leader, use our leverage one way or another to show a path, and that may have weighed in on the Speaker's decision because he knows something has to happen, and we have our options. So why doesn't he lead the way? And the Senate bill was strongly bipartisan. I would be bipartisan in the House. Over 300 votes would be there for assistance to Ukraine. Also, though, having humanitarian assistance for the Palestinians. There are other provisions in the bill. Some of the Republicans don't want to give the Palestinians the assistance, and that's part of the challenge.
It's not just Republicans that don't want to give the Palestinians assistance. Again, this woman is gaslighting. You know, I think about how our government didn't come to the needs of people in Hawaii when they needed that aid, people that were a part that had to deal with the fire in Lahaina. I remember that. I remember how the Biden administration ignored people in East Palestine, Ohio, after the train derailments there, and how people there are still sick and dealing with illness because of the chemicals that were released into the air. But when it came to Ukraine, when it come to Israel, y'all just kicking money out the door. The American people should be livid about this. And I don't know what else to say. I don't understand how people can vote for them. I really don't understand how you can vote for them at this point in time. All that money that went to Ukraine should be yours. All that money that went to Israel should be yours. We should be taking care of people in our country first. Because I don't see other countries. I remember Germany said, yeah, we can't give you any more money, Ukraine. We got to deal with our people. I remember Germany making that statement. But this country, we will sit here, our government will sit here and watch our people starve and our people die and our people suffer from sickness while they give money to other countries. It's a damn shame.
Let you go. We're almost out of time. But I want to ask about the idea that Donald Trump is now the presumptive Republican nominee for president. U.S. intelligence agencies are reportedly preparing to share classified briefings with him. You're, of course, a former ranking member of the Intelligence Committee, Speaker of the House. Should Donald Trump receive intelligence briefings?
You know, I have 30 years of intelligence experience in the Congress. This information is very important, and it is important for it not to be shared. So I would hope they would get some commitment from him, as they do from all of us when we get briefed, that they understand the importance of this information and that it not be shared. The experience has not been positive with him, but hopefully those advising him would say, grow up, live up to your responsibilities. Don't share this with the Russian foreign minister, as he did in the Oval Office before. But we just have to win this election, because he's even predicting a bloodbath. What does that mean? He's going to exact a bloodbath?
Didn't I correct that the other day? See how they're still parroting these lies? Multiple people have already corrected this. CNN has not corrected that. I showed you the video and the coverage where he was discussing that in reference to the auto dealers. He was speaking at the UAW. He was talking about the auto industry. He was not talking about, some physical violent bloodbath. But Nancy Pelosi is parroting that talking point. So was Anderson Cooper. They're continuing to just lie here. Our media, our entire media system is corrupt. They're all corrupt. I don't even like Donald Trump. I shouldn't even have to be the one to correct that. They should actually do real journalism and report the truth, but they don't. And Donald Trump is should be the least of your concerns right now, when you got people in this country that don't even have a damn place to live. And you have a number of black voters that are leaving the Democratic Party. Donald Trump should be the least of your concerns at this point in time. But why is this all happening, folks? It's happening because of AIPAC. Now, I'm going to give a shout out to Ali. Ali, I'm going to give a shout out to you, because you don't see this every day. You do not see this every day. because on MSNBC, they actually decided to tell the truth about AIPAC. Of course, it had to come from Ali. Mehdi's not there anymore, right? I could not believe this happened. And Rachel Maddow's ass sure as hell wasn't going to do this. This is why things are the way that they are if you follow the money. Listen to this.
The American Israel Public Affairs Committee. It was incorporated in 1963. For 10 years prior to that, it was known as the American Zionist Committee for Public Affairs. AIPAC calls itself America's pro-Israel lobby, and according to its website, it has over 3 million members across the country in regional chapters working to, quote, expand and strengthen the U.S.-Israel relationship, end quote. You may know AIPAC as being one of the biggest and most recognizable donors to many of the members of Congress in your state. But contributing to campaigns is a relatively new function of the organization. Before 2021, AIPAC did not endorse candidates nor give political contributions. Its focus was on lobbying elected officials, not actually electing officials.
And remember, JFK actually warned people about, back then it wasn't called AIPAC, it was called something else, but he had warnings about this, that he actually wanted this organization to register as a foreign agent, and for good reason, because it represents Israel. It does not represent this country.
In a dramatic shift in policy, AIPAC began directly funding candidates and spending big on races in 2021. AIPAC Political Action Committee, AIPAC-PAC, filed something called a Statement of Organization with the FEC just in time for the 2022 election cycle, where it spent $50 million, including both direct contributions to candidates and outside spending like TV advertisements. According to AIPAC, it donated money to 365 candidates from both parties, including every single member of both Democratic and Republican leadership in Congress. 109 Republicans who voted against the certification of the 2020 presidential election in America received campaign contributions from AIPAC. All in all, AIPAC gave money to 342 members of the 118th Congress. The 2022 elections were the most expensive midterms in American history, with a total cost of $8.9 billion spent.
And they also support the Democratic Party and the Republican Party. This is why it's important to talk about the money. You talk about the money, you get to the corruption. You understand why the laws that are passed. You understand why most of the bills that they pass, at least on the national level, has some type of corporate interest, or it has interest for the military industrial complex. Once you follow the money, you see why things are the way that they are.
Now, last year, AIPAC ranked 15th in total expenditure by a political action committee, according to data collected by Open Secrets. But take a look at the other funders that AIPAC is competing against for that title. Act Blue and Win Red. They are Democratic and Republican Party machines. Save America is Donald Trump's money-raising operation. The Conservative Club for Growth, Emily's List, focuses on electing Democratic women to office. All of the PACs on this list are massively domestic-focused ideological machines. AIPAC is the only organization in the top 20 whose interests are focused entirely on America's relationship to a foreign government.
The only one. And I would like to see people push our representatives for the call, like JFK tried to do, for the call for AIPAC to register as a foreign agent, or for AIPAC. I would say AIPAC needs to be removed altogether. It's very dangerous at this point in time. If JFK was still alive today, I wonder what he would say.
Now, let's take a look at who benefits from AIPAC's largesse. Here are the top 20 recipients in Congress, the House and the Senate, of AIPAC money in the 2022 midterm cycle, according to Open Secrets. They're members of both parties. They come from every corner of the country with varying levels of experience in Congress. The Democrat Glenn Ivey of Maryland tops the list. He beat out fellow Democrat Donna Edwards in Maryland's House primary after AIPAC poured millions into pro-Ivey advertisements and mailers.
Pause. So the top recipient for 2022 congressional candidates was Glenn Ivey, who is a Democrat. So when I talked to you before about Ilhan Omar calling out AIPAC for supporting Republicans, and I told you that's part of the game that Ilhan plays, because she knows damn well that AIPAC also supports Democrats.
Edwards was running for a second stint in Congress after serving during the Obama administration, where she voted present, not even a no, on a number of pro-Israel resolutions. So the money poured in against her. Not even an endorsement from Nancy Pelosi could save her. Michigan Democrat Haley Stevens unseated Democratic Representative Andy Levin. Here's what Levin had to say about that.
I'm really Jewish, but AIPAC can't stand the idea that I am the clearest, strongest Jewish voice in Congress, standing for a simple proposition that there's no way to have a secure democratic homeland for the Jewish people unless we achieve the political and human rights of the Palestinian people.
AIPAC spent $4 million against Levin. He lost by 20 points.
$4 million. Think about what that money could do for people in our country, right? $4 million. Think about all the people we could house. We could build clinics in communities that don't have clinics. Think about all the communities in rural America that don't have hospitals, or hospitals have actually closed and they have to travel further away. This is a big problem in rural America if you're not aware. Imagine having to call, the ambulance in the middle of the night and there's no hospital near you. It's like miles and miles and miles away just because you live in a rural area. Think about those things.
When Michigan Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib, the only Palestinian American in Congress, was censured by the House in early November over what some lawmakers called her rhetoric around the Israeli-Hamas war, 22 Democrats joined Republicans in that censure vote. 18 of those Democrats received campaign funds from AIPAC in 2022.
18.
Totaling more than $1.1 million. By the way, for these 6 of them, AIPAC was their top contributor.
And there's Richie Torres right there in the bottom right. I sincerely hope people in the Bronx, I sincerely hope you vote Richie Torres out. I sincerely hope, considering the fact that from what I understand, talking to people in the Bronx, he hasn't really done anything for you and he cares more about Israel and kissing their ass. I sincerely hope that you get rid of him. You vote him out.
A growing list of progressive lawmakers who are vocal in their criticism of the government of Israel and its policies and their support for Palestinian self-determination have inspired AIPAC to spend even more. As progressive lawmakers began calling for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza, Slate reported that insiders expect AIPAC's 2024 spending to hit $100 million. In fact,
let me pause here. I don't have to play the rest because I can tell you this part, but another part I was going to say, remember when we had the vote for the Iron Dome, remember some of the squad members actually voted in support of the Iron Dome. Remember AOC voted present in reference to the Iron Dome. The Iron Dome is what protects, it's supposed to protect the state of Israel. And here it is, AIPAC actually fighting back against those squad members, some of the same ones that actually voted in support of the Iron Dome. This is why it does not pay to sell out, folks. It's not worth it in the end. Let's go to some of the comments here, but shout out to Ali. I was really like, whoa. You don't expect to see that on MSNBC, but I think they realize they have to cover it because people are starting to wake up. Go ahead and smash that like button if you haven't had a chance to do so. If you're new, don't forget to like, sub, and share. Let's go to some of the comments and we'll go to our last story. Thank you for the super chat, the Peacekeeper of Chi. They are going to keep on until our freedoms are all gone. That was their entire plan. I could see that. Pat said, didn't Russia just have an election? Aren't they at war? Oh, Pat, you're so good. That's a good point. Yeah, that was the point in reference to what Netanyahu said. Thank you, Breeson. Did you see Mr. Borelli invited you to stream with him to discuss his plant status? Love you, Sabs. He sure did. As if I can just drop what I'm doing at the drop of the dime in the middle of the day and come on your damn stream. Second of all, why would I come on his stream on his platform so he can mute me whenever the fuck he feels like it? He must be tripping. He plant his ass back on his side of the internet. He can do that. Thank you, Troy. Nancy has too many illegal stock trading info in her brain. It's clouding her judgment. Ugh. Oh, and maybe a lack of humanity. Thank you, P. Smith. Netanyahu is an American born in Israel. I thought Netanyahu was actually from Philly. Thank you, Metal. Nancy Pelosi equals lizard person in human skin. I'm not going to talk about people's looks, but I will say I think Nancy been hitting the bottle a little bit. Thank you for the super chat, Troy. Nancy depends on what's in the BBB bottle of Jack. Oh, dear gosh. She sound a little buzzed, right? Okie doke. Eric, we can go to part 2 when you're ready. We're moving on to this Barack Obama story. Because yesterday, I was just minding my own business, and I was looking on social media, and I said, what? And I thought to myself, it said, Barack Obama visits Prime Minister, the UK Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak. And I said to myself, now, why is former President Barack Obama visiting the Prime Minister of the UK? What he has to talk to him about? Let's go ahead and see that clip here when he was first sighted on Downing Street. Get a load of this one.
Now, let's return to those events in Downing Street that we showed you about an hour or so ago, because President Obama, or former President Obama, there at number 10 in the last hour. He's just emerged in the last couple of minutes. Just want to show you those pictures. It wasn't the longest of meetings, perhaps about 30, 40 minutes, but there President Obama just trying to find his car initially. But as he wanders over, let me just put the sound up and hear just a little of what the reporters are shouting.
Do you have a few moments? Did you discuss Gaza?
Come and have a chat with us for a minute.
How did it go? What did you talk about?
Well, he's finally found the car and avoiding all of those questions. We were talking to Helen Catt a little earlier, and a certain amount of surprise amongst the political reporters there, suddenly seeing the former American president arriving there at Downing Street. But no word about what exactly was discussed in that meeting. If we hear.
So this was the part that was pretty interesting to me, right? I don't know if you got to hear Obama. His voice was a little bit low when he was walking towards the car, but they were asking him, did you talk to him about Gaza? And he was like, he said, I'm so tempted to talk to, I guess he was trying to tell the media he was tempted to come over to them and talk to them, but obviously he did not do that. It's really interesting. They were not expecting Barack Obama to be there, and the press kind of sits outside of Downing Street. Actually outside of the prime minister's house. From what I understand, they usually are kind of propped up there just waiting for speeches and all that jazz. So no, they were not expecting him. And there's something else that was a little bit odd too. In this video, it's actually revealed, you would think that if Barack Obama just decided to show up, which we'll get into that in just a second, you would think that this is someone that he knows. He's met the Prime Minister of the UK before. Not so fast. Apparently he has not. Listen to this one. I'm telling you, yesterday, the UK was all like, what?
Tomorrow, am I right to describe it as a secret meeting? We had no idea this was happening, did we?
I think it's being described as a private meeting, but certainly unexpected to see the former US president show up at Downing Street. We're told it's a courtesy call while he's in town for work to do with his foundation, and decided to drop in on the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak. And I'm told that the two of them have not met before, so this is their first meeting, and it is a...
Pause. Everybody catch that? They never met before. This was his first time meeting Rishi Sunak. Now, Barack Obama was apparently there to support his foundation. He was there for the Obama Foundation. And we'll get into this when we talk about the Logan Act, because some people are saying that what Barack Obama did actually violates the Logan Act. Not necessarily. We'll get into that. But what is strange is that he just decided while he was there for the Obama Foundation that he would stop by and, have a little chat with the prime minister that he never met before. It's just like, if I'm in your city to attend an event and I just happened to stop by your house and we never met, it just seemed a little bit odd. But I'll tell you what I think they talked about.
A private informal chat, a source tells me. So We may not be given a readout of it, but you can imagine they might touch on the global picture and instability in lots of different parts of the world. But Mr. Obama smiled and waved to the cameras as he stopped outside at number 10 just after 3 o'clock. And I was trying to think about when he was last at Downing Street, and certainly the most memorable time was when he came in 2016 during the EU referendum and appeared at a press conference with David Cameron saying that if Britain voted for Brexit, we'd be at the back of the queue in terms of a US trade deal. So not sure if the trade deal will focus in their discussions, but certainly not much has come to fruition on that in the last few years. But Mr. Obama, who of course left the White House in 2017, may be discussing the Conservative Party's current situation with Rishi Sunak, but it's being described as an informal chat between the two of them. I'm told that Lord Cameron, the Foreign Secretary, is not present, and seems that there'll be plenty of them for them to talk about in terms of global issues, but it's unlikely we'll be given a full readout of that meeting because it's being described as a private meeting.
It was described as a private meeting. Now, Ancient says you think Obama is telling him to step down. We're gonna get there. We're gonna get there, Ancient. Hold on, we're coming. The Guardian went into a little bit more detail about Barack Obama's visit. Barack Obama drops in on Rishi Sunak on London trip. So it goes on to say Barack Obama has held talks with Rishi Sunak as the former U.S. president paid a courtesy visit to Downing Street during a trip to London. The pair are understood to have discussed a range of subjects during an hour-long meeting, including one of the prime minister's favorite topics, artificial intelligence. Well. Obama, who served 2 terms in the White House, 2009, 2017, before he was succeeded by Donald Trump, was in London as part of work with his Obama Foundation, which oversees a scholarship program and other initiatives. The prime minister's official spokesperson said Obama had made an informal courtesy drop-in as part of his trip to London. And as I said before, how do you drop in to see someone that you never met before, right? And I want to highlight this part as well. The two held what were understood to be largely one-to-one discussions in the prime minister's study. Obama briefly paused at the door of number 10 to wave to the cameras, but no photos were released from what Downing Street said was a private meeting. So let's get into what I think is happening here. So again, I said to myself, why is the former president meeting with the prime minister of UK and they've never met before? What would he have to chat with him about? Margaret Kimberly, I think, hit the nail on the head. She was responding to me. And Margaret Kimberly said, they're in a jam with Ukraine failure, scared because of Galloway's victory, and the Tories are headed to defeat in the next election. And we're going to break down those bit by bit here. And I actually want to start off with the Tories. So the Tories is the Conservative Party in the UK. And that is Rishi Sunak's party. He's a part of that party, and he doesn't seem to have a favorable following right now. So there is a lot of rumblings about the Tory party in the UK actually not doing too well, or they may get stomped in the election. But then there's also this issue with the election because Rishi Sunak is actually trying to change the date of that. So we're going to get into this clip here from Sky News. The Tory party is in shambles.
I mean, first of all, Sam, what's happened?
This is a significant breaking development from the Prime Minister. For the last few days, I have to say, Adam, there has been something close in parts of the Conservative Party to flat out panic about the performance of the Prime Minister, where the Conservatives are going, the fact they're 26 points behind in some polls. And pressure has been building on, pressure been growing on the Prime Minister to call an early elections. One of the solutions, one of the ways out of the situation that the Conservatives are finding themselves in. He has, in the last half an hour, clarified that that's not going to happen. Let's hear from him.
in several weeks' time, we've got elections for police and crime commissioners, for local councils, for mayors across the country. They're important elections.
And not a general election.
That's what I'm focused on. There won't be a general election on that day. But when there is a general election, what matters is the choice.
So Rishi Sunak, you should know, also very corporate, just FYI, corporate establishment shill.
So that's Rishi Sunak ruling out May the 2nd. But now what, Sam?
It's a good question. The reason that pressure was growing on May the 2nd is that Tory MPs felt it was becoming unsustainable. They thought that Rishi Sunak has not much left in the tank, according to one person he appointed to his cabinet. They worry that the summer will look terrible with small bite numbers increasing. There's little sign of economic good news. There's not a lot that this government is doing. And that's why maybe they thought putting an end to it sooner rather than later was a good idea. He has ruled out just one date, May the 2nd, the date that the local council and local mayors were up for election. He said on ITV West Country that won't happen. But to be honest, there can be an election at any point all the way up to January of next year. So when will it be? Rishi Sunak has always said that his preference, his presumed intention is for the second half of this year. That's led us to think that maybe a date in October or November will be the right one. In October, it means that party conferences would be cancelled. In November, it ends up being quite close to the US presidential election. There are problems, advantages and disadvantages with all the dates. The question for me, Adam, is just how long can things go on as they are if they don't improve for the Prime Minister? The pressure is becoming immense. Inside Number 10, they know that they're losing the support of MPs. What happens if half the councillors, for instance, are lost for the Conservative Party?
Rishi is trying to stall. He knows things are not looking good for the Tories and things are not looking good for him either. Remember, he was not elected. So there's concern there as well. There's another clip here from Sky News where Labour is actually asking, what is Rishi Sunak afraid of? And again, this is what I think had to do with that meeting that Barack Obama had with Rishi Sunak. I don't think it was just like stopping by and saying, hey, what's up? Nice to meet you. I think they had a lot of things to talk about. And part of it could be what's happening to the Tories, what's happening to Rishi Sunak, George Galloway's win. There's so much more. And Ukraine, of course, is in shambles.
Now it's time to speak to Labour about the day's political stories. I'm joined this morning by the Deputy National Campaign Coordinator, Ellie Reeves. Very good morning to you.
Good morning.
The Prime Minister says the election won't be May the 2nd. What do you make of that? No big surprise, really.
Well, you know, we've had 14 years of Conservative government, and I think people rightly want a general election. I think you should get on and call it for the 2nd of May. That would be the right time to have an election in the electoral cycle. We've got local elections and mayoral elections on that day. And I think the public should be able to go to the polls and vote in a general election on the same day.
It's the Prime Minister's prerogative. He can choose when it's best for him to choose it.
Well, he's got until the 26th of March to call an election for the 2nd of May. What's he running scared of? Get on and call it so people can vote for change.
Well, he would say he's not running scared. He'd always managed expectations and suggested it would be in the second half of the year. And you weren't really expecting a May election anyway, were you? I mean, if you look at the access talks that Labour has got underway now with civil servants, which always happens with any party that might win an election, that only happened at the beginning of this year. That's pretty late. You can't really be expecting a May election.
Well, we're prepared for a May election, and until the 26th of March, the last day that Parliament can be dissolved for a May election, then we'll be ready for it. Rishi Sunak, he's squatting in Downing Street. He's an unelected Prime Minister. And, people up and down the country, we saw in the by-elections in Wellingborough, in Kingswood, Tamworth, Mid-Bedfordshire, that there is an appetite for change. And I think it's right that people are able to go to the polls on a general election. So we are ready. We would fight for every vote in a general election. But, after 14 years of failure, I do think people should be allowed to have their say.
OK.
I love the way she said that. After 14 years of failure, people should be allowed to have their say. So yeah, he's trying to find a way to delay this. Now we get to the George Galloway piece. Now, remember, George Galloway's win was a big deal. Obviously, Prime Minister Rishi did not like the fact that George Galloway won. He was not supposed to win, according to Rishi Sunak. And it actually says something about where the people stand. Because again, remember, it's not like they voted for Rishi. And it tells you the direction that the country is moving in. And he doesn't like that. That scares him. Remember, George Galloway is, pro-Palestinian supporter. He's been very vocal about that. He also hosts Moats TV. So he's anti-imperialist. He's anti-war. And Rishi Sunak, again, is another corporate shill. He's a rich, rich man, and he supports the military-industrial complex. So after George Galloway won, remember, this is something that Rishi said to show you just how upset he was that George Galloway won.
In recent weeks and months, we have seen a shocking increase in extremist disruption and criminality. What started as protests on our streets has descended into intimidation, threats, and planned acts of violence. Jewish children fearful to wear their school uniform lest it reveal their identity. Muslim women abused in the street for the actions of a terrorist group they have no connection with. And it is beyond alarming that last night, the Rochdale by-election returned a candidate who dismisses the horror of what happened on October the 7th, who glorifies Hezbollah and is endorsed by Nick Griffin, the racist former leader of the BNP.
Lie after lie after lie about George Galloway. Again, going back to October 7th, when a lot of those stories that were reported about October 7th have been debunked multiple times. This guy is a puppet.
Yes, you can march and protest with passion. You can demand the protection of civilian life. But no, you cannot call for violent jihad. You can freely criticize the actions of this government, or indeed any government. That is a fundamental democratic right. But no, you cannot use that as an excuse to call for the eradication of a state or any kind of hatred or anti-Semitism.
It's not anti-Semitism. See, here we go again. What I tell you. He's a part of that Zionist machine, right? Again, let's remember what they say in reference to international law, what it says. It says that occupied people have a right to resist. They also have a right to armed resistance. That's international law. I didn't write the law, but it's there. We're going to do call in tonight after the show because, oh man, this is a doozy.
This week, I've met with senior police officers and made clear it is the public's expectation that they will not merely manage these protests, but police them. And I say this to the police: we will back you when you take action.
And he is pro-police state. So you see, these are the people that they want in office, you guys, not just in the United States, but also when it comes to other Western countries as well. Let me show you how based George Galloway was in reference to this, because Rishi sees someone like George Galloway as a threat. George Galloway says, I warned 10 Downing Street, we will fight any plan to conscript our young people to fight Joe Biden or Donald Trump's wars. Russia is not our enemy. China is not our enemy. Your government and the economic system it represents are our enemy. I promise you, the mother of all battles against this. Hashtag no conscription, at no NATO, no to war. See, we could never get someone in Congress that's a member of the Squad or honestly, even the Freedom Caucus. We can't get anyone in Congress to say this because our politicians are too afraid of the Israeli lobby. George Galloway is not afraid. And that is what worries Rishi Sunak. And I also feel like this is what worries Barack Obama. And I'm pretty sure in that conversation that they had where he just dropped in, they probably talked about this too. The fact that someone who's pro-Palestinian won. Now, people are saying that Barack Obama's visit is a violation of the Logan Act. Not necessarily. And I want to get into this and I'll explain to you why as well. Linez says the Logan Act really... She says, MAGAs are so stupid. Clearly, Obama let President Biden know he was going to the UK for his foundation. If it was for the US, President Biden has the power to authorize whoever he wants to negotiate, unlike Trump, who isn't POTUS and just met with Orban. So she pointed out what Trump just did recently. So the Logan Act is a U.S. federal law that criminalizes negotiation by unauthorized American citizens with foreign governments having a dispute with the United States. The intent behind the act is to prevent unauthorized negotiations from undermining the government's position. It was originally established in 1799. The long title is An Act for the Punishment of Certain Crimes Therein Specified. So what I want to say is, remember the purpose of the trip. Barack Obama said his purpose of the trip was for the Obama Foundation, right? So, and he just happened to stop by to see the prime minister while he was there. But Biden probably already knew he was going to make this trip anyway. So there probably already approval. But what this does allude to, which many people have been wondering and have questioned, who is really running things up in this piece, right? Many people have made the claims that they think Barack Obama is really the one that's pulling the strings and that's making decisions because Joe Biden is not all there. It's not all there right now, right? So he's dealing with mental decline. So this leads back to what people have been saying about, Barack Obama has been pulling the strings all this time, which could still very much be true. I don't know. But it is still just weird to me. And I believe those are the reasons why he decided to drop by. Remember, George Galloway's win is a step towards progress. It's a win for the left. It's a win for the pro-Palestinian movement. And what did I tell you about Barack Obama? Every time there's some progress being made, Barack Obama shows up to try to stop it. He did that with the NBA strike. He did that with Black Lives Matter. Every time. I can't think of a time when he didn't show up and say, all right, everybody, I think we need to go home. I can't think of a time. And now he just happens to be at the prime minister's house for a chat, to chat with someone that he has never met. Coincidence? I think not. I just want to actually, hold on. Yeah. I'm just going to read the intro, Eric. All right. So one of the things that we do talk about on this show are ballot measures and ballot initiatives. And we have moved on to New York. So we're covering the results for 2023. And we're now in New York. So I want to read the intro and then we'll finish the rest on Thursday because I do want to head over to Colin as well. For the state of New York, you have to know that New York does not allow its voters the option to place initiatives on the ballot, be they to pass or repeal their own laws or ratify their own amendments into the New York State Constitution. There's a note here from Roger says, although we'll see about that. Only the legislature can pass laws independent of voter involvement and place initiatives on the ballot using a legislative referred constitutional amendment for voters to ratify amending the legislative initiatives within the New York Constitution. So we will finish up New York on Thursday, but I did want to go ahead and start the intro to that. But this is another way that you can actually have some type of direct democracy in this country. You can vote for representatives and hope that they represent you. Most of the time, I would argue they don't. Or if you live in a ballot initiative state, you can actually put forth some of these measures on the ballot or just by going and voting for them. That's your way of actually voting, having that direct democracy where there's a question on the ballot and you vote for that question. No representative in between you and that question. And so I think that's a power that some of us are just not utilizing. And I think that if you live in a ballot initiative state, you got to at least go vote for these. I know a lot of you don't want to vote for the president, but if you live in a BI state, you definitely want to show up and vote for those ballot measures. That's very important. And they've gone very far here for people. I know in my state, in Massachusetts, and it's not just blue states. So we're getting closer and closer towards July, which is when we'll start to cover the 2024 ballot measures that will be on the ballot for this November. We will do call in tonight. I'm going to take a quick break. Eric's going to hop in for just a second. And Eric, while I'm on the quick break, you can show the poll results because I forgot to show the poll. Yeah.
Oh yeah, the poll. All right, we'll do that. Let's see. Let me adjust this screen. So let's show. Let's see. All right, we'll show the poll a little later. First, let me. All right, so this is a part of the show where I jump in, Eric T. Red here. I'm usually in the background, and we give Sabrina a little break, and then we're going to jump over to call in. You can do call in on your computer or on your smartphone, and that's where we get to hear from you. And the call in segments are fun. And there's actually, when Sabby comes back on, there's a bit of news about call in, but we'll get to that. But we had a few chats come in here. Let's see. We had this chat that Sabby highlighted. In the UK, it's a toss-up as to who is the most unpopular party. Political leader Rishi Sunak or Keir Starmer, both are hated. Yeah, and it's it's a similar thing that like what we get here with everybody gets it that both these two major parties are not representing us, right? They're representing that top 0.1%. That's really the key thing. It's not about left and right. It's about up and down is the key thing. And people are realizing it, but the trick is then what do people do after they get that realization? And so the trick is to come up with what people do with that energy and with that desire to break out of these two parties. And that's where we need to get into our demands and solutions. Yeah, now PB World said this guy boasted he didn't have working class friends. And thanks for this super chat, Troy Perron. Here comes Obama around the corner like a Debo. Yeah, so so one of the stories we had earlier was about the Supreme Court and the way ruling the Supreme Court. Like TAIBBI is certainly the person to listen to on this and to really follow. And I'm sure he'll be posting summaries of this. He's been tweeting about it. He was on Rising. TAIBBI has on Substack, he has this site called Racket News where I'm sure he'll be doing summaries. But listening to him, what I get from all this is that this whole situation, which is highlighted by the Twitter files and with government censorship, I mean, it's really a no-brainer. Like, this shouldn't be like some toss-up thing where it's like, oh, well, it's a tough case or whatnot. No, I mean, the government overreach was massive, where you had the U.S. government basically threatening to almost shut down and severely impact these social media companies if they didn't follow government directives. And so they damn well followed the government directives. And the appellate courts, the lower courts, understood this, and TAIBBI, said that quite plainly. Like they had the 4-point test to figuring out if this was happening, and it really was kind of this no-brainer. And then it gets to the Supreme Court, and I think what's happening is the Supreme Court is by far the most political court of the system. And you have the most politics, you have the most ideological judges, that end up getting appointed. But the real key to it, I would say, isn't so much that they're conservative or liberal or Democrat or Republican. The key is, those are all like corporate lawyers, essentially. Any Supreme Court justice is corporate in front of all else. And and there's that key thing. They are representing the billionaires and the mega corporations. I mean, that is their constituency. That is their number one case, their number one incentive, their number one directive in all this. And so when you have a case like this with the censorship, what's happening is that billionaire class, that mega corporate class, they want this censorship because they purchase the government, our hugely corrupt government, and it's all of a piece where they want that power to be able to censor speech because they are rightly afraid of the 99%, the populace, the rest of us. One other thing I noticed was that the plaintiffs in that case were two of them were Martin Kulldorff and Jay Bhattacharya, who co-wrote the Great Barrington Declaration. And so this stuff, goes back to the COVID times and how all that was used as an excuse for the censorship. And I would recommend anybody to, if you have a chance to follow them on Twitter. That's Martin Kulldorff, Jay Bhattacharya. You can find what they posted on the Great Barrington Declaration. And I think what they posted there has been, very much vindicated. And it's just really interesting to me that they are also the plaintiffs in this very timely, in this current case. As far as like what we do about it, well, if you're the only way you can really fix Supreme Court justices is you got to look at how they get there, and how they get there is presidents appoint them. So the only way that you're going to have better Supreme Court justices is if we have better presidents, and the Senate also confirms them. So you need a better Senate. Essentially, we need a real government instead of what we have right now, which is this corrupt monstrosity that doesn't work for us, doesn't represent us. And it comes down to the demands. Like, we have to get together as the 99% and demand better. We need to be saying to this government, you work for us, and we need to get the big money out of it. And if we can come together as the 99% and recognize that and start making those clear demands, then we have a shot at getting somewhere. But it's going to take a lot. I mean, it's going to take a recognition of that. It's going to take like literally millions of people in the streets to be demanding to get the big money out, to be demanding an end to the corruption, and that's at all levels. One of the things that has happened since Reagan is that Reagan did this did this rather effective trick where Reagan essentially turned the government into this other, where now like even people who aren't conservative like see the government as this like other entity, and it's understandable now because that's what it's become. But part of what we need to be doing is we need to be demanding a change to that. We need to be demanding to get the big money out and to turn the government into what it's supposed to be, which is supposed to be our government, right? That's supposed to be our Congress. That's supposed to be our president. It's not an easy task, and that's why I say it's literally going to take millions of people in the streets to do it. But the first step in that is the realization of what the problem is and what the demands are and what the solutions are.
Yep.
All right, so I got to the let me I'll have to queue up the poll, but for now let's show. Here, I'll have you bring up. Where is it? We'll bring up the call-in room. Oh, I got to show you something else. Did you see what Colin announced? The site?
No.
We'll bring that up here. Let me bring this one up. And also bring.
You got
gotta get home. Here it is. Yep. All right, we can show that. Dun dun dun. Colin is shutting down. Colin will shut down on April 25th, 2024 at 4 p.m. Please reach out if you want recorded content. You can check out our new product at Studio Rumble. So things are going to be a changing. We got about a month, but it's on for tonight.
All right. Well, I guess I'll be checking out their new product. It's on till April. In the meantime, I'll check out their new product. But we're gonna do call in tonight, guys, because so much to talk about. And I don't know if the poll's still there because I just pinned the call in link.
I'm bringing it up now. Oh, did that get rid of the poll?
I don't know. I'm sorry. Sorry, guys.
Never mind about the poll.
Yeah.
Well, it was about last time I saw it, I think it was about like 88%.
Okay.
Saying, what was the question?
If the government should control social media.
Yeah. So yeah, it was about 88% or whatnot. So, and maybe like 5% said yes somehow, and the rest said I don't know. So I don't know what those yeses are for. But anyways, carry on.
All right. All right, let's do it, guys. Let's ride this bad boy out. Call in episode 159. We're going to discuss Obama's visit, SCOTUS, social media, and more, and anything else you want to chat about tonight. So I am ready for that. The link is pinned to the top of the chat. You guys know how we do this. If you got the app, you already know what to do. If you don't have the app, you can click on the link from your laptop, and you can still access it, and you can still call in from your laptop as well. But we're going to go ahead and head on over there. If you're not going to do call in, I think Nick over at RBN is live right now. So you can go check out Revolutionary Blackout Network. I think he has Q featured as a guest tonight. So it should be a pretty interesting stream. Q always has pretty cool takes. All right, guys. So that is it for us here tonight. I am not live on Wednesdays. I'll be back Thursday evening. Have a good night. Keep up the fight.